Oops. That's what happens when you take some time off. Hello, everyone. I am Julianne Meyer. You are watching Own Your Wellness, and I forgot to put myself on the screen. So sorry about that. But as I mentioned, I have been away. I have been in Florida speaking at an event and doing LA Leadership Week. So a lot of on-camera stuff. You'd think I'd have it down by now. But today is not about me. I am so excited because I have a really amazing guest today. His name is Jeff Pearson, and he is a friend of mine, somebody that I absolutely adore, him and his wife. And he has a show on our network. And also, he's just an amazing human being. But I'm just going to bring him on because this show is all about him sharing his brilliance. Hey, Jeff, welcome.
Thank you, Julianne. It's awesome to be here. I'm so excited.
Me too. It's finally time. I mean, we've been pussyfooting around this for a minute now, and we're like, hey,
a little bit.
And you have such an amazing story. I would love for you to share a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. So Jeff Pearson, I'm here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I'm a Colorado native, born and raised here. And man, I have an amazing family. My wife and I have known each other since we were 12. We met in 7th grade band class. And, we've been married. This June will be 25 years we've been married. We've got 3 amazing children, a 20-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, my son, Nick, who's 17, and Kasha, who's 15, my youngest daughter, and she just got her permit. 3 drivers in the house. So anyway, so that's us. That's our family. We live in Colorado. We're loving it. I had kind of a unique start to this world. We in 1977, when I was born, my parents took me to the 2-week checkup and said, "Hey, let's do it so we can go home and start our life together with our new little baby boy." And they said, "Whoa, hold the phone for a second. There's something wrong." And so we, at the 2-week checkup, they do a lot of follow up. At birth, they measure like how long, how much do they weigh, how big is the head, and that kind of. And then they do the same thing at 2 weeks to make sure they're tracking. And that head measurement was just a little too big, so they said, "Well, let's do a CAT scan. It's probably nothing. Don't worry, Mom. It's probably nothing. Let's just do it." Well, it was something. It turns out that I had a condition called hydrocephalus, which is a condition that is presented when the cerebral spinal fluid, which is a fluid that your brain produces all the time, 24/7, as long as you're alive, and that fluid just naturally drains down ventricles that are in your brain, and it goes down and everything's cool, and it's a continuous process. So that CAT scan revealed that one of those ventricles in my brain was blocked. And so they had to do a very common surgery that they do a lot, but it's a big deal. They did brain surgery at 2 weeks old. So that was kind of my start to the world. Was invasive brain surgery at 2 weeks old, where they drilled a hole in my skull, stuck a little catheter in there to drain the fluid, attached a pump called a shunt to it, and then attached a tube to that to drain it to reabsorb somewhere else, kind of like an artificial ventricle. So as you know, you would never look at me and say, "Oh yeah, I can tell you've had brain surgery." But it's there, and it was quite the start for my parents. And I kind of wish I was a fly on the wall in that room, just to see the response. I can't imagine with any of my kids hearing that. So,
the fear.
So that was our start. Yeah.
Well, it's a lot of people watching are like, I've never heard of that. But there are quite a few famous people who have struggled with this as well. Can you name a couple?
Famous people, man. There's only one that pops into my head off the top of my head. You know what? Sally Struthers, I think, who just passed away. Mm-hmm. That's right. I was trying to remember. Yeah, Sally Struthers had it. You didn't really hear about it, though, and you never really, the reason you don't hear about it is because it's something you can't see. It's like you don't just look at somebody and go, hydrocephalus, obviously. And Danny Bonaducci is the other one. Yeah. If anybody remembers Danny from the Partridge Family, the little redhead kid from Partridge Family, he was just recently diagnosed in his 60s. So
that gives me the question. First of all, Can people reach out to you through this website?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So if
In
anybody
fact,
here knows Danny Bonaducci, let's let Jeff know because we've been trying to get him on his show. So boop, boop, boop.
yeah.
Good
In
shout
fact,
out
Jeff,
there.
Jeff at Hydro with Hope. Jeff at Hydro with Hope would be a perfect email to reach out to me. So yeah, but that website is there's a place to contact me on there too. So yeah, let's.
Perfect.
It's been a few months. He had surgery about he had his first brain surgery to address hydrocephalus about 6 months ago. So I've been in the hunt since, to help him out.
Yeah, my question then is you were born with it, but it's something you can develop?
You can acquire it anytime, man. It's crazy.
Oh,
It's
wow.
it well, first of all, they're the born with it thing. There are over it's like one out of every 800 babies born in the US every year is born with it. So that's like 430,000 some babies born with it every single year. So every 15 minutes somebody's having brain surgery to address hydrocephalus. It's very common.
Wow.
It's crazy common, but it's just it's not well. In fact, it's just as common as Down syndrome. Everybody's heard of Down syndrome, and it's
Mhm.
more common than spina bifida. A lot of people have heard of that, but uh, unlike Down syndrome, it's invisible, so you can't. So that's kind of why it gets I don't know overlooked or it's like it's not that big a deal, you know.
I think with
The,
media in particular, it's like you can't see it. There's no drama, so it's not going to sell, so it's not going to be popular.
right?
I mean,
Yeah,
I hate to
exactly. If it doesn't sell, right? If it's not a good candidate for a good fundraiser, right? You're not gonna
it's kind
totally.
of,
I
yeah.
don't get it either. But and there is there are lots of organizations out there. I mean, the National Hydrocephalus Association is out there raising millions a year for research and all kinds of stuff. They're great. They're fantastic, but they're so small. It's such a small organization, and there's just not that much out there. It's just not that well known. So that's what we're trying to help. We're trying to fix that.
I love that. I love that you are using, and I hate to use the word pain, but I guess brain surgery is painful, but using your pain for purpose. Now, if somebody were to have this, what can
Yeah,
they expect? I know that everybody's experience is going to be different, but
sure.
are there signs that you can look for? Is there, because this is something that you can develop, then if you're not born with it, how would people know?
Yeah, exactly. It's the common symptoms. I mean, if you went on like WebMD and said, you know, what are signs of hydrocephalus? By the way, don't ever do that. Anytime you go on WebMD, you're going to be dying in an hour. So don't do that. But common signs are, headaches, of course. Headaches are a big deal. Sometimes dizziness and nausea and throwing up and all kinds of things like that. But I haven't had all those symptoms necessarily for me, but that is supposedly like, hey, watch out if this happens
So
for
basically,
it.
anything that would be normal, like maybe I should go see the doctor. It's not,
Yeah,
although I don't know that people would know to look for that. So that's kind of fascinating. I wonder how often it gets undiagnosed
it
or
gets
wrong.
diagnosed a lot, actually. In fact, one of the crazy things that I just learned in the last couple of years that it gets misdiagnosed as is Alzheimer's and dementia. So
Oh,
Alzheimer's, yeah, it's crazy because really all hydrocephalus is an accumulation of fluid that won't drain. If
mhm.
there's fluid that's hanging out up there, I mean, there's only so much room, you know, and
Yeah.
so especially with an adult skull that is formed, and so it's got to go somewhere. And so if the fluid is collecting and not going anywhere, it can compress the brain, cause enormous, incredibly painful headaches, and eventually brain damage. And if you don't catch it in time, it can kill you. But so what is Alzheimer's and dementia, right? It's brain related, So I've heard of a couple people that I know, friend of a friend kind of thing, that was misdiagnosed, and then they drained off the fluid. They said, "Wait a second, there was one good doctor that was like, wait a minute, let's check this out." and drained off that fluid and put a shunt in there, and it was like they didn't have Alzheimer's anymore. It was like they were back to normal. So crazy stuff. You never know.
No, you never do. And you've created somewhat of a community for people such as yourself, have you not?
I have, yeah. Hydro with Hope is a website that we created. It's an organization. It's a nonprofit actually that we created back in April of 2022. That is designed for exactly for that purpose, is to help. There are so many other great organizations out there that I don't want to dismiss, but they do a lot of fundraising for research or developing better shunt devices, for surgery or all that kind of stuff. That's not me. I'm not that guy. I'm the hands-on, boots on the ground, give the family a hug that's dealing with this kind of thing. And so the main resource we created was a journal that's actually behind me here. But we created a journal. It's about 150 pages. It walks you through that whole. It's a fill in the blank journal. It walks you through that whole process of, holy smokes, my kid's going to have what kind of surgery now? And through that whole process of surgery and hospital stays and medical record keeping and what do you do afterwards and who can you talk to and all that kind of stuff. So
the people that are watching are probably going, well, you had brain surgery at 2 weeks old and then you're fine. Like for the most part, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about, because when we come back from commercial in a little while, we're going to talk about the family aspect, but, I don't want it to, it's something you have to be on top of, correct?
Correct. 100%. Yeah. 2 weeks old was not the end. It was the beginning. So, yeah, I've actually had 7 total so far. I've had about 15 surgeries overall some of them are related, some of them weren't, but 7 brain surgeries is what I'm at now. And 4 of those brain surgeries have been since March of 2014. So they've been kind of stacking up in the last 10 years or so for some reason. But, yeah, just the main reason you'd have to have surgery is, number one, the diagnosis, to figure out how do you fix it initially, how do you relieve that pressure initially. Mm-hmm. And then, but the problem is these shunts, even though they've been being used for 50, 60 years, still have the highest failure rate of any medical device in history. And so average lifespan of these things is like 2 to 3 years. So I made it out really, really, really well. I should have had twice as many surgeries by the averages. But everybody's different, right? So, had one at 2 weeks old, had one about 6 months old, had one at 18, and then I had a nice long break for about 18 years. And then I had 2 back to back in 2014 within 24 hours of each other, had one in 18 and had one in 21. So you just never know. You don't know. It could be any time. Yeah. Crazy.
That's got to be scary. I don't know. I mean, not that you were really aware at 2 weeks old, but I can't even imagine this tiny little noggin.
Right? I know. I didn't even get it in there. I know. It's crazy.
Itty bitty.
Well, and what trips me out is it's got to access the fluid somehow. So there's literally you drilling a hole in a little baby's skull. I mean, it's crazy. I don't know. It's a crazy process, but it's what's been effective. So, there is another procedure that I was never a candidate for that doesn't require that kind of invasive surgery called an ETV, but I was never a candidate for it. Some people do have success with it. It's where they just they just kind of create a hole back here at the brainstem to drain the fluid instead of going in through the skull. But I was never really a candidate for it for some reason. I don't know. So,
that's fascinating. And I would assume too that, you mentioned Alzheimer's and dementia. Wouldn't that cause also things like epilepsy? Just other things that deal with the brain, like just secondary issues?
It could. Yeah. Epilepsy, seizures is a really, really common side effect. And so, yeah, that's a lot of people. In fact, I have a friend that my wife used to work with, and her husband had two shunts, one on each side, and so apparently the trauma to the brain was such that he did have daily seizures. He was on seizure medications, and and all kinds of stuff. You just, yeah, when you go poking around in the brain, man, it can it can cause some things. You know, it doesn't like to be messed with. It likes to just be left alone, and
Well,
so
something that people
yeah,
also probably don't realize is that once you have a seizure, you're more likely to have another. So whether or not it's epilepsy, you are more likely, because side note about me, I was in an apartment in Italy that had a gas leak. So I almost died from carbon monoxide poisoning. And it was causing seizures. And I could not figure out for the life of me what was wrong. And they couldn't, like, I had an appointment to go see a neurologist. And
yeah,
they're like, well, we can't really tell you anything unless the seizure's happening. I was just like,
yeah. Well, let me mark my calendar for the next time I know what's going to happen then, Doc. Sure. Yeah.
like, thanks for nothing, dude. Plus, I'm in a foreign country and Italian's not my first language. So, it was a little scary, but
yeah, a little bit.
But there are things that you can do too that I would assume that even with, your condition, that diet and exercise and those types of things are important to help keep you healthy.
For sure. Yeah. It is. The double-edged sword with that is, though, a lot of people with hydrocephalus have those co-conditions like seizures disorders, like, gosh, I don't know. There's everybody's an individual, right? So it could be anything, but a lot of those co-conditions can make it hard to exercise. And so, especially in the last 10 years, I mean, we can talk about this in a little bit, but I have had a lot of crazy side effects from these surgeries, and it's made, especially in the last 10 years, it's made it really hard to do anything like that. And so I do what I can, but balance issues are huge with people with hydrocephalus, a lot, because of the equilibrium. And like, I've had a couple eye surgeries too that got the pressure on the brain kind of threw off my eyes when I was a baby. And so I've had a couple eye surgeries. And those have really sent me into a crazy thing where I don't use both eyes together. I only actively use one eye at a time. So it's like if you do, like, remember from Wayne's World, right? Camera one, camera two, camera one, right? He's closing his eyes, right? And I can do that without closing my eyes. I can just switch between the eyes, and I can use one or I can use the other. So it's
crazy.
It's really crazy, right? Think about being able to do that. It's really weird. But it's just one of those things that happens when the brain gets traumatized like that. So it's,
when you go poking around in the noggin like that, I can imagine that it can cause But the thing that I want to point out, and then we're going to go to commercial, is that you have, I don't know, adapted. You know what I'm saying? You've adapted even with the brain. So the body is truly amazing what it can do when we do things like poke the brain, literally poke the brain. Anyway, we do need to go to a commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about, not just with your particular condition, but what it's like to be a family member and to deal with somebody that maybe has an invisible condition. So when we come back, we're going to talk about that and also go into some details about what's been happening with you. We'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us now, I'm Julianne Meyer. You are watching Own Your Wellness, and today's amazing guest, Jeff Pearson. Welcome back.
Hello, thank you.
So, before we went to commercial break, we were talking, I mentioned that we were going to talk about the family, but first I want to continue a little bit about like what your experience is. And, everybody's situation is different. And and the reason why I want you to share a little bit about some of your other things that you've had to deal with is not like the popcorn eating car accident, let's stare at, kind of a situation, but more like you just don't know by looking at somebody what they're going through. And I think that is so important. Like that is the message besides Hydro with Hope that I want to get across today is that you don't know what somebody else is dealing with. So I would love for you to share a little bit more about your experience in particular.
Oh, totally. Thank you for sure. In fact, the example I use with people a lot is that person when you're sitting at it's a grocery store, right? Sitting in the parking lot and you see that person pull into the handicap spot, jump out of the car, jog into the store. They're in there about 20 minutes. They jog out with their groceries. They put them in the car and they leave. And you look at them and let's be honest, you look at them and the first reaction is somebody stole grandma's car with the handicap plate and drove it to the store so they could park close, right? Not cool. What a jerk, right? No, that's the first reaction. The proper reaction is, okay, maybe that person has an invisible condition that you can't see from the outside, and they had to nap for 2 hours to get the strength so that they could go to the store, drive on the roads, deal with that stress, go in the store, do what they had to do in there, get home, and now they're probably not going to do anything for the rest of the afternoon because they've wiped themselves out with that trip to the store. So that's what a lot of people don't think about with people with a condition like what I have or what so many other people have with conditions that you don't necessarily see from the outside. Mm-hmm. And compassion, you gotta be compassionate with this. So for instance, I've had, like I said, I've had 4 brain surgeries since 2014. Two back to back in 2014. In March of 14, I had an infection, a bacterial infection somehow was introduced into the cerebral spinal fluid, and I had a pocket of it hanging out in the abdomen down here, and we didn't want it to get up to the brain, of course, because that's spinal meningitis, and that could really be serious really quick. And so they had me in the hospital for 3 weeks. I'm not going to get into all the gory details, what they, how they contained it and stuff, but they had me in there for 3 weeks and 2 brain surgeries within 24 hours because they kind of missed the mark on the first one. And I woke up and said, nope, you missed, guys, do it again. And so they put me back under. But after those 2 surgeries, I was under for probably 8 to 10 hours between the 2. Not to mention the anesthesia effects, which are real. Yeah. But I started developing migraines, and it got to the point about a month after those surgeries that I was having migraines 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Oh my God.
And 24/7 migraines, and they lasted about a year. And so for about a year, I was basically useless. I was on the couch a lot. I did work some, but I was literally holding on for dear life, to do my work. If I had to stand somewhere for very long, I was holding on to the wall. And so that is a side effect of, we went back to the neurosurgeon and I said, what you did the surgeries. Tell me what we can do. You've got to have an idea of what we can do. And he said, well, I guess you're just going to have to live with headaches. I'm sorry. That was it. That was his response. And so, which I don't begrudge him. I would not, neurosurgeons have a very narrow scope of practice. I know people are going to hear that and go,
I agree with you.
What a jerk. But their scope of practice is you have something in your head that's not working properly and it's going to kill you. I'm going to replace it with one that works properly so you stay alive. Right?
Very good point.
I was alive. He kept me alive. Mm-hmm. During that year, after about a year of that crazy migraines, we did find a couple things that got rid of them, natural, non-medical things that actually got rid of those. In fact, one of the treatments got rid of them in a month. and it was
Wow.
awesome. And so what I usually like to tell people is traditional Western medicine kept me alive. Alternative medicine gave me my life back. So it's a
Ooh.
blend. It's a blend, and there should be a blend of traditional and natural stuff. And that's kind of part of my wife's mission is she's really passionate about that. And so we kind of look at that as something we talk about a lot too. So
Yeah, something that you said that I want to point out is, it is considered alternative, but it's been around way longer than Western medicine. And that's the thing that
no,
we as Americans are not marketed that because there's not as much money in that.
exactly,
But
exactly,
I love your point. Like the surgeon was really good at what he did, and that was what he knew, and that was it. You don't
yes,
go to the tire shop to buy bread. You just don't.
right, that's right,
Like you got to ask the right questions to the right people. And if you're not getting it, and this is where Own Your Wellness comes in, where, you have to be your own advocate. If like
yes,
that answer doesn't work for you, you can find something that does. I mean, we've already
yeah,
talked about how amazing our bodies are and how much they, can heal on their own and things like that. So why not introduce something a little more natural to help it along the way?
right. And same thing with the surgery I had in 2021. One of the, like I said, poking around in the brain, you never know what you're going to get. In 2014, it was nonstop migraines for a year. In 2021, it was, that filter in your brain where you're in a crowd and you're in it, right? You're at a big convention or something, but you're able to carry on this conversation in front of you because your brain automatically makes the rest of it white noise, right?
Yeah.
Or something close to that. So that filter was completely blown to bits in that surgery in 2021.
Oh,
So
wow.
I had no filter. I had no filter. So if I went into going to church or going to the supermarket or it was like my brain was trying to take in everything as if it was this conversation.
Wow.
And that doesn't work. You can't do that. Not to mention, large motor tics was another side effect from that last one. I mean, my whole right side of my body was just, I mean, it was, you wouldn't, it was tiring. It was very tiring. But
Yeah.
the doctor, again, I don't know what to do with that. I've never seen that before. I have nothing in my prescription pad that can help you with that.
Exactly.
Right. And so
Let me give you a pill.
yeah, exactly. Here you go. So we went the natural route again because it worked before. We said, well, of course we're going to look there. And yeah, we found some stuff that worked there. And I mean, I'm not, ticks are not a thing right now. And my filter is mostly back,
Oh, thank goodness.
It's crazy, but to your point, you have to be willing to say, no, doctor, by the way, they're working for you. Don't let them get that confused. Okay. Every other industry on earth, people are like, you go to get your car fixed, you go to buy a toaster, or whatever. You compare prices, you compare quality, you compare convenience, you compare all these things.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to the doctor, you just you just flush it all down the toilet and say, well, the doctor said.
Exactly.
Well, he's working for you. You may not be paying him with your checkbook or your credit card, but he is working for you. So if you don't like what he says, go ask another one and get to the bottom of it. It's your responsibility. It's your health. It's your life. To be an advocate for yourself. So,
and something that I want to say too, it's like you know you better than anybody else, better than the doctor, because you live in there. Your soul lives in the meat suit. So you know you better than anybody. Like you saying to the doctor, you missed, with that first surgery. A lot of people might not have said anything.
yeah. I mean,
they can't tell.
I knew it. Yeah, I knew it. It was very obvious. I woke up with the same headaches I had when I went under. So I was like, nope, something's wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, you just gotta know what it. I mean, to be fair, people with hydrocephalus and other conditions that have something to do with the brain, I think we become kind of headache connoisseurs. So we, you know, so it's a, it's not a great thing, but it is a useful thing.
Yeah,
So,
well, I mean, I would hope to be able to tell what's going on at some point versus having to run to a doctor who's going to make their best guess.
right.
I wrote in a book one time, I was talking about not being your diagnosis. And, no matter what, doctors, it's always a guess. It's always a guess. And most of the time, like, I think it was scary. I can't remember what the numbers are, but like 50 to 70% of the time, the diagnosis is wrong. So,
Yeah. I mean, when there's even when it comes to neurosurgeons, right? Like a GP, a general physician will go to school, they'll go to med school, they'll go to whatever, do all the things, and they're in school for like 15 years, right?
Mhm.
Well, a neurosurgeon is in there for probably 25 before they, between their regular education and their specialized and their whatever and all the things, and then they finally hit the floor in the hospital and they've got their white coat and they're ready to practice and they're ready to practice on their own, right? They've got their own thing. That is when their education starts, honestly.
Yeah.
Because everything they learn in med school is all about averages and things that have happened to other people in the past and things that have, it wouldn't make it into the med school books if it wasn't common, right? So all this uncommon stuff, like some of the things that were happening to me with this last surgery with these ticks and these, they've never heard of that. They're just practicing. I like to just say, don't worry about it. Don't be mad at them. They're just practicing. It's okay.
Well,
You
it is
know?
called a
And
practice.
so, yeah, yeah.
Literally.
So exactly. And so,
Yeah.
their real education, their street smarts education starts when their foot hits the ground on that first day of their, on the job, so to speak. So,
That is a
um,
brilliant insight. I just want to point that is a brilliant insight because I think too, like back in the day when I was a server in a restaurant and I go
mhm,
through my training, and let's say I trained for an entire week. Well, I guarantee that first day something that didn't come up in training happened. Guaranteed because they just taught me the basics. Like there's
yep,
things that you can't plan for with anything. That's just life.
yeah, exactly. So really it's a practice in how adaptable are you and how good are you with talking to patients
Yeah,
because
listening.
you
Listening.
know and listening, talking and listening. Yeah, I mean listening to the. I mean, yeah. Oh my gosh, in high school, I had to have one of my brain surgeries was when I was 18, but that was after 2 years of me trying to convince them that I needed this surgery
Oh, wow.
because I started having headaches about my sophomore year and or beginning of junior year of high school because the shunt is attached to a cord, and that cord they put a longer one in when I was about 4 years old for it to grow with me, but the tissue attached to that, and
Oh.
it's still in there. They couldn't get it out, and and so as I grew, the shunt started to actually pull away from my skull and started
Mhm.
pulling out of where it was supposed to be, and as you can imagine, that can cause some headaches. And so for 2 years, I kept telling the doc, this is what's going on, doc. I can tell you what's going on. You need to do a CAT scan. We need to do surgery. This is, you know,
Yeah.
and finally, after 2 years, they compared enough CAT scans to each other that they're like, oh, yeah, it is happening.
I
You know,
told you. I don't
I
know
live in
anybody.
this body, doc. Come on.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I don't blame them. It is what it is, but it's still, you gotta advocate for yourself. Even as a high schooler, I was like, come on, doc, you know?
That's
So
fascinating. It's kind of crazy. It's like, who wants to sign up for brain surgery? I mean, if you're saying like, I don't know
nobody,
a soul that would want to do that. Maybe pay
no.
attention to the
Mm,
patient. I don't know. To me,
no.
that's just insane. So let's talk a little bit about, well, let's talk about your relationship with your family versus, their experience because I've been a caregiver. And when you have somebody in your family that needs special assistance, it's extremely hard for the caregiver as well because all the focus is basically like, who am I? This person, like in your case, brain surgery, who am I to be upset? Like, we forget about
Right.
ourselves as caregivers. But I
Yeah.
bet I'm going to guess too that you, and maybe not all patients, but you as the person that's having this stuff done, I'm guessing that there's a little bit of like you feel almost guilty or responsible for them going through this stress.
Yes and no. I mean, we kind of, I mean, first of all, I have to say my family growing up was absolutely amazing with it. I never was treated as a sick child. I was never treated with, oh, you have that thing in your head, you can't do that, or you can't, it was
Yeah.
always, let's see what you can do,
I love
and
that.
so it was awesome. And so my parents instilled a very cool mindset in me that, okay, let's try that. Okay, that's not a good idea. Let's try that. But it was never, you're sick, you can't do that. And same thing with my family now. They have been amazing. My in fact, my wife my wife and oldest daughter have been on two separate shows of mine to talk about their experience. And so it's really fascinating to hear, from her what she went through during that 10 years, during those really dicey surgeries, And
Mm-hmm.
so, but yeah, I agree with you. You can kind of feel some guilt as the patient going, I can't believe I'm sorry you have to devote
Yeah.
all this time and energy and emotion to me, but my family has been absolutely amazing. In fact, while in the throes of some of the really hard days in the last few years, my youngest has been I mean, all of them have been incredible, but one of the experiences that sticks in my mind is, there's been times where I've ended up on the floor, and the headaches and the dizziness, and it's, it's too much. And I'm on the kitchen floor, I'm making dinner, and then all of a sudden, boom, and my youngest she's like, hey dad, how's it going? You doing okay? Do you want a pillow? And she'll just bring a pillow, and I'm laying at in front of the stove on the kitchen floor with a pillow until my brain is, ready to let me get up again, and people are just milling around like nothing's happening, and it's like so it's kind of a cool thing because it's like they know that I'll be all right. So they kind of
I
do
love
their
that.
thing,
Yeah.
but they're also extremely compassionate, and they're helping me where they can, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and because nobody's gonna totally understand what I'm feeling because they don't live in here. I do. So, but
Exactly.
to the extent that I can tell them and show them, they've been absolutely amazing. So, yeah,
I love that. I
it's
love
been
that.
great.
Oh, that's beautiful. On that note, we do need to go to one more commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to just continue the conversation. But I want to ask you a question, something for you to think about, Jeff, while we're in the commercial break, and you'll answer when we come back, is what is one of the biggest blessings you've received from this diagnosis and that experience? So we'll talk about
Love
that
it.
when we come back. Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us now, I am Julianne Meyer. You're watching On Your Wellness, and let's bring back Mr. Jeff Pearson. Welcome back. We
Thank you.
changed camera angles. Woo! But fine.
Right.
So, before the commercial break, I asked you a question, and the question was, what is a blessing that you've received because of this? Something that maybe you're grateful for.
Oh man. There's been a lot, actually. It's been crazy. And it's always fascinating to me that this type of experience you can look at it and say, oh well, there's a blessing out of it. Because who wants brain surgery, right? That's it sounds like, well, that sounds awful. But I tell you what, just in particular, the last 10 years, because really from birth to 36, I really didn't, there was no bumps in the road. It was really smooth sailing,
Mm-hmm.
Thank God, it was just not a lot to deal with. And then in the last 10 years is where we kind of started hitting a few bumps in the road, but those bumps in the road helped me slow down enough that I could see some things that were right in front of me, and I was like, oh, maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that. If those hadn't happened, like in 2018, one of the things we came up with Hydro with Hope, sitting in the neurosurgeon's office waiting for him to come in for a follow-up, because I heard a family in the next room that sounded like they were having a really rough time. And I was like, that flashed me back to I wonder what my parents must have felt like it too, and I was like, man, we got to do something about that. And I never would have thought of that if we hadn't had those surgeries. So Hydro with Hope wouldn't be here if I hadn't had those surgeries. And so that's a blessing, because I know that there's been people that have been helped from this organization, from this journal. And it's just, I've met so many amazing people through that I can't imagine not knowing now. So that's a huge blessing that came out of it. And honestly, our TV show has been a huge blessing. And that's another one that's come out that I never would have been part of Achieve. There's a lot of things that you look back and go, oh, that all lined up just perfect to lead us here. And so, it's crazy. You never see it at the time, but looking back, yeah.
Yeah, you can always connect the dots backwards.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs did something to that effect. But tell us a little bit about your show.
So the show's called Invisible Condition, and it's on the Achieve TV channel, just like yours. And thank you, Julianne. And launched April 4th of last year. We've been on the air just over a year. And we have guests come on and talk about their experience living and yet thriving despite being, living with a condition that you can't see from the outside, whether that's hydrocephalus or fibromyalgia or schizophrenia or PTSD or what, the list goes on.
Yeah,
they're everywhere, right? And for whatever reason, there's people from all walks of life that are living with this kind of stuff. So honestly, it's been, and then of course organizations that are helping that population. We've had some incredible organizations from around the world on the show that have been really, really cool. And kind of a side benefit is now I've got this virtual Rolodex of all these amazing people and all these amazing companies that if people need help, I can help them. I can refer them to a place, or I can, so it's been really cool.
So you created a community, which is pretty amazing.
It's really cool to see how that worked. Like you said, you don't see it until you look back and go, wow, look what happened there,
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's interesting. I was speaking with somebody yesterday, and I'm not going to I don't want to give any details away about who it was because it's not my story to tell, but this person was wrongfully imprisoned for a crime they didn't commit. And they were in maximum security prison for 6 months before they got exonerated. And that person was like, obviously it took a while to get over that. I mean, hello. And I'm sure that they're still dealing with the aftermath of that situation. But the thing that was fascinating was they were talking about how, they were able to use that experience, and that, and this person believes in the law of attraction. I'm not saying that I mean, it's a universal law, so it is what it is. So they
Yeah.
said they brought it into their own life, which I thought was fascinating because who would choose that? But they were saying there's something about that experience I needed to become the next version of myself. So I did call it in, even though I didn't want it.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's
Yeah.
taking ownership. Wow.
Yeah. It's
Wow.
true. But if
So
he hadn't gone through that experience, he wouldn't be where he is today. Yeah, it's
exactly,
rough, but yeah,
exactly, exactly.
for
And, you know,
sure.
I've had my own experiences too, where like I never would have asked for my mom to pass away when I was 14. However,
Right.
I wouldn't be who I am had that not happened. So I'm okay
Exactly.
with it.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I would have chosen
Exactly.
differently, but I didn't get the opportunity to. So, but anyway,
Yeah.
enough about that. You know, we've been talking a little bit about throughout the show about Hydro with Hope, but we haven't really talked about what that is. And you mentioned before that you have a workbook, but I'd like to really touch on that again because people who either are experiencing this or have a family member, I want them to have a resource.
Thank you. Yeah. So Hydra with Hope, if you go to hydrowithhope.com, you'll see a few things. And one of them is our book, of course, our journal that's available, which it's something, there's something powerful about having something physical that you can carry with you into a doctor's office. That's why we didn't make it an app first, because this will never crash. You write it down, you take it with you, and there's something powerful about having that. It's like a confidence thing. You know, you've got this. You go in, you answer questions, you know what you're talking about. But also, we're working on having kind of a membership community within Hydro with Hope as well, to be able to give people even more of a deeper dive into like me being able to, have personal time with them and have a couple calls, like Zoom calls throughout the month that, people can
Mhm.
come on and say, this is what we're going through. What do you suggest? Can you help us? Is there resources you could think of, or anything like that? I love talking to people about their experience and helping them realize that life is not over just because you have to have brain surgery. And I love speaking. I've got a couple great speaking gigs coming up this year, to talk about this stuff and to talk about just that what I've learned from my 7 brain surgeries, right? Like what can you learn from something like that? And so it's just been really cool. And those two work together so well. The nonprofit and the TV show just seem to be just together so well. So it's just really cool.
Synergy. I love that. I love that so much. And I'm personally analog. I still write notes, even though I
Yep,
just prefer it. And also, it works better for your brain. So there's that
it
added
does,
bonus as well. And like you
for
said, you're
sure.
literally holding on to something physical when you go into the doctor. To me, that is powerful. It's almost like a shield. Like, okay, not that you need protection from your doctor, but you do need to feel confident in what you're saying
Yeah.
because there's still that idea. We are taught at a very young age to trust people outside of ourselves first, especially doctors. The person in the white coat is the one that you trust, and their opinion matters more than our own, et cetera, et cetera. But if you've
Yeah.
got it's easier to stand firm in your power when you have it, like literally right there. Take a look.
Yes. 100%.
I love
Yeah,
that.
for sure. And you'll learn stuff filling this out. You will learn things about your experience in the hospital as you put pen to paper. Things come to your mind as you're writing, as you're physically writing, different than if you're typing it into an app. So the brain is wired differently when you're writing things than when you're typing things.
It
So
is.
it's really cool. Filling out my own journal has been fascinating. Stuff that's come out. So yeah, it's been
I love
crazy.
that. We've talked about your show. When can people watch it? When is it? When do episodes drop?
So episodes drop every Tuesday and every Friday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. So that is, yeah, twice a week, 10 a.m. Mountain Time, every Tuesday, Friday.
and they're obviously on demand
Yep.
on Achieve TV. So I love
On
that.
demand, all the way back to, you can watch all the episodes going all the way back to that first one on April 4th of last year that I still watch and chuckle and go, oh, wow.
Isn't it
So
fun though to see how much you've grown?
it's awesome. And it's, speaking of family, you were talking about asking me a question about family. So what the first episode was my wife interviewing me and saying,
Mhm.
hey, here's your host, and this is what he's gone through, and this is why we're doing this show, and this is why it's called what it is. And so that was really cool. But then later in that first season, we're about halfway through our third season right now. But in the first season, my wife and my oldest daughter, Elizabeth, came on to talk about Elizabeth's experience, because as the oldest child, she remembers a lot of that dad being carted off in the ambulance and all the dicey stuff that was going on, and watching my wife go through all that. And so it was a fascinating episode from that perspective. So it was really cool.
I'm really glad that that they're willing to share their experiences as well, and also
Yeah,
that you are, because there's always going to be something that people, even if they don't have that exact condition, there's universal experience of certain things. The people,
for
they know
sure.
that they're not alone. So that's what I love about that. We
Yeah.
have about a minute left. So is there any final thoughts that you'd love to share with the audience?
One last thing that I want to share is out of the journal. It's a real quick thing, and it's out of the about Jeff. There's a section on here that, like, hey, who is this guy and why is he writing a book? So there's a little section in there, but it says, having lived with hydrocephalus for over 45 years, I can say three things with 100% certainty. God is faithful all the time. God is in control, and that's a good thing. And number three, life does not have to be perfect to be amazing. So
Ooh, I just got the God bumps, the chills with that one.
it's
Besides,
true.
perfect is boring. If you've ever had perfect, I don't know about you, but when my life there's like nothing, I start creating things like challenges for myself. It's fascinating how that works. But
Right?
in my life,
Because you
oh,
think that because everything outside of you is saying, well, God forbid you go on and take social media at face value. Everything looks so perfect, but it's never going to be, but it doesn't have to be.
exactly,
So
exactly. Well, on that note, Jeff, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you, and thanks for being here. And everybody, go check out his show, Invisible Conditions. That's it for today.
thank you, Julianne.
Thank you. Bye for now, everyone. See you next week.